Live on DSTV channel 421, GoTV channel 125, you are watching Connect Africa on the Joy News channel. Rwanda is in a period of national reflection, and as the country marks 30 years since the atrocities of the 1994 genocide, we hear on the strategies of this East African country to build back stronger as a more united country.
What happened in Rwanda in 1994, where we had a genocide against Tutsi, which was targeted the Tutsis, and this means that we don't want it to happen elsewhere in the world. That's why we say never again.
The Rwandan High Commissioner here in Ghana as we speak about the country's past and reflecting on the way forward. Also, there's been an increasing fear about Ghana and Cote d'Ivoire, as well as other West African countries, and the fact that they may be losing out on exporting cocoa into the European market owing to a new controversial traceability policy. Tonight, we'll find out what the real motive could be behind this new initiative by the European Union.
The discussions, they were ongoing for quite some time, because we adopted legislation 2 years ago, and 2 years were given for a transition period. So now we're aiming to have the legislation running since the beginning of the next year.
So what's going to be the fate of West African countries giving this traceability policy? I sit down with the EU Commissioner for Oceans, Fisheries and the Environment shortly here on Connect Africa. But first, though, we have a wrap of some of the major stories making the rounds across the continent for you.
Lawmakers launched consultations across the West African nation on Monday. The move comes after controversial constitutional reform was passed in late March by lawmakers whose legitimacy has been challenged. Togolese lawmakers will conduct for 3 days a tour to listen to and inform civilians on the constitutional reform. Customary rulers and selected groups are reported to be the main target of the consultations. The proposed constitution, which was passed on March 25th, grants Parliament the power to choose the president, doing away with direct elections. Instead of a renewable 5-year term, the proposed bill restricts the power of future presidents and introduces a one-term limit. The reform hands over a great power to a figure familiar to that of a prime minister, officially called the president of the Council of Ministers. This individual will either be the leader of the party, which secures the majority during the legislative elections, or the leader of the winning coalition of parties. But the opposition fears the rule could become an avenue for Gnassingbé to extend his grip on power. Togo's recent history has been dominated by the Gnassingbé clan, which has ruled since 1967. Nigeria has recovered 30 billion naira, equivalent to $24 million as part of an ongoing corruption probe into a suspended minister. According to the country's financial watchdog, the funds were traced to more than 50 bank accounts. Humanitarian Affairs and Poverty Alleviation Minister Betty Edu was initially suspended in January over the alleged diversion of $640,000 of public money into a personal bank account. President Bola Tinubu then ordered an investigation into her ministry. At the time, Dr. Edu, who is 37 years, denied any wrongdoing. Her office said she had approved the transfer into a personal account, which was not in her name, but said it was for the implementation of grants to vulnerable groups. The Economic and Financial Crimes Commission said during its nearly 6 weeks of investigations so far that it had found many angles to examine. A mortar attack in the east of the Democratic Republic of Congo has killed 3 soldiers from a Southern African military force. All of those who died were from Tanzania. 3 others were hurt. The Southern African Development Community says a hostile missile fire fell near the camp where they were staying. A source has told the BBC that the attack took place at a base for Tanzanian soldiers in Sake on Saturday. SADC has not confirmed these details or said who was responsible for the attack on its soldiers. The Southern African Regional Force was invited in by the Congolese government last year to halt worsening insecurity linked to numerous rebel groups vying for control of territory and eastern DRC's rich mineral resources. Chief among them is the M23 rebel group, which Rwanda has been widely accused of backing, including by UN experts, although Kigali has always vehemently denied this. In turn, it accuses the Congolese army of working with the FDLR, a militia group linked to some of those responsible for the 1994 genocide in Rwanda, a charge rejected by Kinshasa. The famous Rwandan singer Bruce Melody was arrested Wednesday in Burundi, where he had just arrived to give concerts, and placed in custody for fraud, the Burundian Ministry for Interior announced on Thursday. According to witnesses interviewed by AFP, the car carrying Itahiwaku Bruce from the airport of the economic capital, Bujumbura, where he had just landed, was intercepted by several men in police uniforms and civilian clothes at around 5 p.m. local time. The news of the arrest of the Rwandan star, who was to give 2 concerts in Bujumbura on Thursday and Friday, has made the rounds on social media networks. Bruce Melody is a target of a complaint of fraud following the cancellation of concerts a few years ago.
Well, some of the major stories making the headlines across the continent. But now to our focus, because Rwandans are marking 30 years since the 1994 genocide, which claimed many lives, especially the Tutsi group. Now, although the East African country, as we know it, has made some remarkable journey of reconciliation, it is now using the event of Kwibuka 30 to send a stronger message to the world that there is a need for peace and reconciliation. Here in Ghana, a series of activities will be taking place in the coming days to mark the event. So I caught up with Rwanda's High Commissioner in Ghana, Rosemary Mbabasi, on how Rwanda is getting on 30 years after the genocide.
A nation in grief, mourning the loss of family, friends and loved ones. That is the story of Rwanda today, which is reflecting on the darkest period in the country's history, 30 years after the 1994 genocide. In spite of the remarkable journey of reconciliation, the country's leader, Paul Kagame, believes there's a lot of lessons to be learned from the past and to inform the future generation that never again will such atrocities be committed in Rwanda.
Our journey has been long and tough. Rwanda was completely humbled by the magnitude of our loss. And the lessons we learned are engraved in blood. But the tremendous progress of our country is plain to see, and it is a result of the choices we made together to resurrect our nation. The foundation of everything is unity. That was the first choice, to believe in the idea of a reunited Rwanda and live accordingly. The second choice was to reverse the arrow of accountability, which used to point outwards beyond our borders. Now, we are accountable to each other above all. Most importantly, we chose to think beyond the horizon of tragedy and become a people with a future. Today, we also feel a particular gratitude to all the friends and representatives here with us from around the world. We are deeply honored by your presence alongside us on this very
This
heavy
week
day.
is being marked by reflection amongst Rwandans, both home and abroad. And that's why I decided to engage Rwandan High Commissioner in Ghana, Rosemary Mbabazi, in a conversation about the country's future while reflecting on the past.
I first of all want to thank you for finding time to speak to us, especially to share experience as Rwanda. And as you rightly said, from 7th of April, Rwanda and the entire world is commemorating, and the UN has designated this day as a day of reflection. And why should we remember? It's actually, why shouldn't we remember? We are remembering the lost lives of our people, over 1 million and more, because they're still resuming their bodies up to now. Even this period, we're going to be burying the remains of the people that we find even after 30 years. And so we are remembering their dreams, we are remembering their lives, we are remembering as we rebuild ourselves, especially the survivors who survived this genocide. It's also helpful for them to recover and move on beyond the trauma that they experience, especially in this period of time. Though we remember every day, it's only that this day is special for the reflection of the entire world. And we remember what happened in Rwanda in 1994, where we had a genocide against Tutsi, which was targeted the Tutsis. And this means that we don't want it to happen elsewhere in the world. That's why we say never again. So when we remember, we are reflecting on all this that happened. We are also rebuilding ourselves. We are also remembering the resilience of the Rwandan people to move on 30 years after the genocide against Tutsi, but also to build a future that is devoid of genocide again elsewhere, not only in Rwanda.
How do you respond to the feeling that this is not a period to reflect over and that we allow it to go with the past?
When we leave it to go and pass on as if nothing happens, it can happen again anywhere else. But if we remember, we pick out lessons, we learn from it, and we make sure that when we keep on remembering, it helps us to also heal, but also help that it doesn't happen elsewhere. So it shouldn't be passed on as if nothing happened, because something happened, and over 1 million people dying is not something so small that is minimal, and we minimize that we don't remember. So it's very important that we remember their lives, their stories, their aspirations, their dreams, and we live. As we live, they live.
In fact, even as we speak now here in Accra, there are a series of activities happening back home with the world watching on, heads of states pouring into your country and sharing messages of goodwill with the people of Rwanda. Your president, Paul Kagame, appears to have some concerns even about how the world views this genocide. It's not just a genocide, but genocide against the Tutsi. Why?
Mm-hmm. Actually, we are so grateful to many heads of state who have really moved and traveled to Rwanda, heads of delegations, international organizations. They came to be with the Rwandans, to be with us, to support us, because some of them have been with us over a period of time. And it is very important that we appreciate what they have done, especially visiting us. But of course, in this specific period of time, as His Excellency the President said, spare us this day. Out of the 365 days that we have in a year, 7th of April should be left to remember for us, rather than bringing in the denials, that genocide, and minimizing it and politicizing it. So it's very important that we have all the people joining us, because the story speaks for itself, and we're so grateful that the people, many countries have flown in, not only for the 30th commemoration, but even before. And it's very important because we keep our memories alive.
Would you say that your country has moved on, 30 years on, because the feeling is, and that argument is being made based on what the president says, that it's as though there are some unresolved issues. The international community is being called out. What is the expectation of the Rwandan people?
Yes, we say we moved on, and we moved on really fast. We are coming from the bottom and from ashes, and we are trying to rebuild our country. We're not there, we're not yet there where we want to be, but the journey is still on. But we have moved on. 30 years ago, in 1994, when the genocide against Tutsi was happening, everything was in total destruction. Schools were not there, hospitals were not there, they were all destroyed, roads, banks, you know, hotels, every aspect of life, every economic activity was also destroyed. And we started from ashes, we started from nothing. And when people visit Rwanda, you cannot even imagine it was the country that was in ashes in 1994. And so the country has moved on, and because of the visionary leadership, the leadership that is visionary, and we had a vision, and as a country we know where we want to go, and we're still on the journey. So we are one of the fastest growing economies in the world, not only in Africa. We also have installed connectivity in the country, fiber optic laid across the country so that we can connect our country and make business much easier, and also service delivery to the citizens much easier. We have also provided education system, because education is very key for the next generation, because we have over 70% are below 35 years of age, so it's a young nation. So education is an area that we have invested very heavily. We have universal access to education for all the primary and the secondary education. We have a number of universities, more than 40, local and international, that are already established in Rwanda. We have developed infrastructure. If you see, we have the most dense of roads on the continent that are really clean and very, very strong, that are durable over a period of time. We have established hospitals, because of health care is very important. And also we have medical services, what we call mutuelle de santé, which is mutual health system, or collective health system that is supporting every citizen in Rwanda is covered. So the mutuelle de santé, or the universal access to health system, is covering 98% of our citizens. So no one can fall sick and die at home. They can be given these services, and it is also subsidized at a subsidized rate. For the survivors, there's a lot that has happened, especially that I said over 1 million people and more, because I said we're still burying our people. We had widows, we had children, orphans, whose parents all died, and they have nowhere to go. The government became the parent. We also have widows and widowers whose children all died. Actually, recently we were looking at statistics, about 15,000 families were wiped out.
So all of this is happening because of one man, the president of your country, Paul Kagame. Yes, he's doing transformational leadership, but on the other hand, he's facing criticism for using this remembrance period as a political tool. He's been responding to that himself. How do you convince the world that you're not using this dark part of your history to consolidate the regime of one man? Of course, be sure to watch that full interview with Rosemary Mbabazi later on the Joy News channel. But time is running out for the Ghana Cocoa Board and other authorities managing the export of cocoa within West Africa, as the European Union says its transition period for the implementation of the controversial traceability policy will elapse at the end of this year. This means that from the start of next year, Ghana's main cash crop, as we know it, cocoa, cannot be exported into the European market unless evidence is provided that the Ghanaian cocoa that is moving out is not sourced from a recently deforested land or contributed to in any way to degradation. So currently, as we know it, 60% of the country's cocoa produced from Ghana finds its way into the European market. So how will this impact the Ghanaian and West African market? Well, I've been engaging the European Union's lead of the delegation that is in the country, negotiating with the authorities and speaking to Ghanaian and West African officials on the need to revise and include sustainability within the traceability policy. And there's more in the following report.
Cocoa is a major source of foreign exchange for the Republic of Ghana. However, the increasing demand for this cash crop over the years has resulted in the use of more deforested land to feed the supply chain. This situation has prompted the European Union to pass its traceability policy. According to this new regulation, any cocoa product entering the European market should not be sourced from recently deforested land or contribute to forest degradation. After 2 years of running what it terms a transition period, the EU says it is time for action and the need to enforce environmental sustainability.
So the discussions, they were ongoing for quite some time, because we adopted legislation 2 years ago, and 2 years were given for a transition period. So now we're aiming to have the legislation running since the beginning of the next year.
The EU Commission is this week sending a high-level delegation led by its Commissioner for Environment, Oceans and Fisheries to Ghana, which is one of the world's largest producers of cocoa.
Because this legislation is applicable to all. It's not aiming at any country or any region in the world. It's applicable to EU member states, the same as the countries outside the EU. What it tackles is the commodities. Commodities that do have the biggest impact as regards the deforestation around the globe. That our consumption pattern is one of the reasons that drives deforestation. So therefore, this step by the EU is taking responsibility for our consumption pattern and ensuring that the supply chains through which certain commodities reach the EU, that they are free of deforestation.
Ghana and Cote d'Ivoire are the two world largest producers of cocoa. There is in fact a framework that guides our trade, the Ghana Cocoa Initiative. I was speaking to the CEO a couple of weeks back, and he appears to identify two major factors for which we're seeing this high level of disruptions within the supply chain. First off, the issue about other markets or third states paying higher prices to these cocoa farmers. Don't you feel that if we apply the standards, these countries might take advantage of the situation and then we'll see smuggling into other markets other than the EU?
On contrary, I think sustainability pays off, and consumers they are aware very well that they want to have a product that comes from the areas that are not associated with child labor abuses, that are not associated with the deforestation. So therefore, those certified goods, they of course are much more expensive in the market, but they also don't have a negative impact, especially on producers, large as chocolate producers or other products. Well, even if that certain product will and then it would try to enter EU, it would still need to be traced back to its origin. Because the information that is needed to provide is very simple. It's the geolocation data of the farmland. So this is something that doesn't move. And for us, the most important is
In the wake of the implementation of this new policy, the EU has come under intense criticism for placing the livelihood of smallholder farmers in jeopardy. But the multilateral body says the reverse is the case, as it is urging the regulator, Cocoa Board, to endeavor to meet this new standard.
First of all, I think, we should not shift it onto the farmers. have here in Ghana, where you have the Cocoa Board, they are an umbrella organization who has the ownership over the farmland. So they know what's going on in which farmland, for how many years, when that farm was established. Right. And I'm pretty sure all that data they do have, and all they need is to share it with operators who export goods to other countries. That's it. So I don't think so we need to, put any sort of additional pressure on the farmers.
And of course, what a great and inspirational conversation there with the EU delegation here in Ghana. But you can watch more of that and a playback on all of our social media handles. It's at Joy News on TV. I am Blessed Sudan. Log on to myjoyonline.com. We have a lot of stories there for you. We'll see you again. Bye for now.